Randy Blaukat still crashing out about forward-facing sonar. Yesterday I made a video giving my thoughts and my opinions a little bit about this and what I think these bass fishing organizations should do with the emerging technology and stuff like that. But I never posted it because I wasn't really happy with it. There were some things I left out, some analogies I wish I would have used, so I kind of just scrapped it. And this morning, I'm in the boat right now, you can see, messing with some tackle, and I was listening to a video Randy just had posted about the pros now at the top of the Bass Elite Series, these young guys in their 20s or whatever. They're technically amateurs because they can't fish without forward-facing sonar. That being said, he's not necessarily wrong, but here's the thing, dude. Me personally, it's not something I'd ever put on my boat. You can see I got a 7-inch monitor up there, and I got a 7-inch monitor up here. It's a Lowrance Elite triple shot. I don't really know how to use the side imaging too well, so I don't. I use it mainly for depth and water temp, show me transitions underwater and water temperature. I grew up fishing out of a float tube, so fishing the bank, so I still pretty much stay on the bank. I don't ever really go offshore. I do just fine. My console unit, I use the GPS mostly just to help keep me in the river channel, because the lake that I fish, there's a lot of submerged timber, big trees outside on the edges of the channel if you get out of it, and the water, when it's low, it can be dangerous, and I don't have the money to put a new lower unit on, so I try to avoid that. But it got me thinking, Randy's talking about all these guys at the top now are amateurs without the forward-facing sonar, and I had a similar experience in my career. So for those of you guys who don't know, I've been an off-road fabricator for 25 years or something like that, 20 plus years, 22 years. I started off building sand rails, buggies, go out to Glamis and, drag race and stuff, these big V8 cars. And then I got into my real passion, which was building custom trucks for racing, down in Mexico and, out in the high desert in California and stuff like that. And when the last big shop I worked for before I went into business for myself, a friend of mine and I both were kind of building our own company, like on the weekends and here and there. We both worked for separate shops. He at one point owned his own shop, and then we kind of went into business together, but the money wasn't there. This is during like the 2008 housing crisis, so a lot of people weren't spending money. So we ended up both working for a shop together, and that shop was kind of stuck in the past. And we were younger, that shop had been in business for 20 some odd years, and we were younger, and we came in with all these new ideas and stuff. And eventually they kind of gave up and just turned us loose. They're like, whatever, do what you guys want to do. And we elevated their quality of product and stuff that they were building because we were newer, we were younger. We knew what the next generation of people that were coming up in the sport wanted on their trucks and wanted to see, and what was working, and blah, 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 right? Well, 25 years later of me doing this job, eventually what happens is the industry progressed even more, and everyone started drawing things on the computer. I was doing everything by hand, bending tubes and notching tubes, and everything was done by hand. All the bumpers and the roll cages, my buddy specialized more in the suspension aspect of things. So all of the A-arms and stuff he was building, he was doing pretty much by hand. We would eventually have somebody sit down and draw things in CAD and put them into the computer so they were easily reproduced. But now everything's done on the computer. Guys like me are pretty much obsolete in the custom fab industry because technology is advanced so far. Custom roll cages for the longest time had to be done by hand because the contours of inside the cab of a truck and stuff. But now they have, these 3D scanners where they can scan the whole inside of the truck, or these ferro arms that they can pick up pivot points and design the suspension, even down to if you're part of SEMA. I don't know if it's still like this, but I know that if you were part of like the SEMA, organization or whatever, you can get a hold of Chevy and say, hey, I want to build a custom suspension kit for a SEMA truck. It's the, whatever, Chevy Silverado. Can I get your CAD files? And they would send you the files. And then you could just use off what they had drawn to build your suspension and everything like that and get the whole thing. And now everything's done that way. They draw everything up. They send it to a laser cutter. The laser cutter cuts even the tubes, cuts and bends all the tubes or bends all the plates and everything. And it shows up on a pallet, all labeled, however they labeled it. And now you just need to hire a guy to weld. So what it did was it allowed people with no skill set, like me and my friend, who had been doing this for so long, it allowed people with no skill set, guys that were good with technology, it allowed them to build these immaculate products. And like the barrier to entry was easier, because now you got some kid that's good at drawing stuff on a computer can build these $100,000, $200,000, $500,000 off-road vehicles in his bedroom and draw it up and hire some guy at $20 an hour to weld the car together for him and, sub out the rest of the work, the wiring, the plumbing, whatever. And, I saw it coming, for a long time. I wasn't resistant to it. I just didn't. I got out of off-road, building custom off-road stuff. That's a whole different story. But that's where Randy's at right now. Randy's at the crash out phase of, midlife crisis of rah. These kids don't know what it was like back in my day. And if you don't grow with the industry or grow with the times, you fall behind. And he's falling behind. I take that back. I don't want to say he's falling behind. He has a legit argument about the impact it's going to have. So back to the off-road thing. He has a legit impact on what forward-facing sonar is going to do to fishing as a whole, like to the environmental aspect of it, of fish. But go back to the off-road analogy. So it allowed the barrier of entry, it lowered it. So more people were now going to the desert. And before, when I was a young kid, like we were sleeping in tents, and we were lucky if somebody's dad had a trailer and we would go out there and go camping and ride our dirt bikes. He had a trailer and we would go stay with them. But now with like the invention of these side-by-sides, which took off, average Joe Blow on credit can go and get an RV or some tow behind trailer, a side-by-side, or he can pay someone to build him a truck. And now the desert is flooded with a bunch of people that don't have the passion for off-road like we did growing up, where it was like a select few people that were willing to spend the weekend in the desert, the weekend deep in Mexico, racing these trucks and dealing with everything. And now technology's made it way easier and way more people are involved. So it's good because way more people are involved, but it's bad because way more people are involved. And what's happening is like areas like Glamis, they're like shutting more areas down. It's not nearly as fun because it's a bunch of these little side-by-sides out there, and a lot of people aren't building the big V8 cars anymore. There's like just a lot of stuff about it, right? And so that's what's happening with fishing, is now it's become way easier for people to get into it because that learning curve is taken away. So more people are going to go out and they're going to fish and they're going to catch these fish, and it's going to have an impact on the quality of fish. It's going to have an impact on fish catching in general. But I think what will happen is much like everything, baits work for so long and then they eventually stop working because the fish get smart to them. I think that's what's going to end up happening with the forward-facing sonar stuff. Is it's working really great right now, and obviously technology is going to get better and it's going to go further, but it's working really great right now, and these fish are going to get smart onto these little minnows that they're jigging all the time. And I know you can use forward-facing sonar to catch them with other baits, but that's what's going to happen is these fish are going to get smart to this stuff. And the old school guy like me, like Randy, are going to pick up a jig or whatever bait it was that worked 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And we're going to go down a weed line or a bank or whatever it is and be able to catch these fish that these forward-facing sonar guys aren't even looking for or can't even find because they're always out fishing a rock pile that's in the middle of the lake that nobody knew about. I think that's what's going to happen. It'll kind of equalize itself out eventually. That being said, it is having an impact, I know, on people that keep fish, like the crappie fishermen, the pan fishermen. Randy swears up and down more and more people are catching and eating bass, which, if you listen to biologists, it's not necessarily always a bad thing, right? Because you need to take some of the fish out of the environment, much like, hunting and stuff like that. For one, you get disease when you get overcrowding. And for two, I think it makes the quality of fish better because you don't have these big schools of small fish. You need to listen to some more biologists on this. They're smarter than me on this. I'm kind of just off the top of my head knowing the little bit I've heard talked about. So I don't disagree with him. I disagree with him on a lot of things. I'm going to tell you that right now. I'm not a big fanboy of his. You've probably seen my handle in his comments pushing back on a lot of dumb stuff he says, like big swim baits. I got a few of them tied on right now. His opinion on big swim baits is off base. He says a lot of things that just don't make sense. But he's not necessarily wrong about forward-facing sonar, which brings me to his solution to forward-facing sonar is get rid of it. Ban it altogether, which that isn't going to happen. Let's be real. It's not going to happen. And just like everything, it's politics, right? The big forward-facing sonar, and he talks about this a lot. These big companies, electronics companies, have the money to lobby to keep it going, keep it in the fishing industry. And I think what the fishing organization should do is, Randy had made a video the other day talking about equity in bass fishing, which I think is silly. However, there should be classes, right? I compete in archery tournaments, and the bow, a guy shooting like a long bow or a reef curve bow is not competing against me with my bow. I got a $4,000 bow with all the greatest parts on it, $500 set of arrows with a custom, scope with a 6-power lens inside of it. I got an app on my phone that tells me each distance I need to adjust my sight for different yardages. And so the guy that's shooting a recurve and instinctively shooting with just his eye, no sight, no stabilizers, that guy's not competing against me. So I think instead of having equity in bass fishing, we should have classes. There should be 150 horsepower below class, and then 150 horsepower and up class, and a forward-facing sonar class and a non-facing sonar class. And on the 150 horsepower and below class, you're only allowed to have one front monitor and one console monitor. Stuff like that. And what you'll get is, much like archery, is you'll get people that are fans of the smaller horsepower, less technology guys. And they're going to want to watch that because they want to watch a guy, hammer in the bank with a jig or whatever it is, running a spinnerbait down the bank. And then you'll get the guys that enjoy watching someone stare at a screen and shake a little minnow. So I think it'll help the sport and you'll get more entries. Like I would enter, a bigger organization tournament if it wasn't only one class, because I got a 19-foot boat with a 90 horsepower motor on it, a 7-inch graph up front and a 7-inch graph back here, where these guys have $150,000 boats with $50,000 of electronics, 250 horsepower. I can't compete with them. I can't make it to the spot before them. I don't know. I don't have the electronics to compete against them. So paying $5,000 entry fee to compete in against, I'm just outgunned. Just bottom line, I'm outgunned. And if you made it to where there was different classes in these bigger organizations, you get more entry fees, because guys like me would want to enter at a lower deal, And it's not a matter of who's got, and it becomes a money thing, just much like the off-road thing. It becomes a money thing. And in off-road, we have a bunch of different classes. We have the stock Volkswagen class, guys that are racing VW bugs that are almost completely stone stock with a roll cage in them. And then you have the unlimited class, much like my bow. My bow I'm in the unlimited class because I got all the bells and whistles. In off-road, they got the trophy truck and class 1 class. These guys got hundreds of thousands of dollars into their millions of dollars into their race program, where the class 11, the Volkswagen guys, don't. So I think there should be multiple classes when it comes to these tournaments. These bass fishing organizations, instead of trying to eliminate forward-facing sonar altogether. And I think the market will start to eliminate the stuff that people want to see. Like I said, people don't really want to watch guys fishing forward-facing sonar. They don't really want to watch guys staring at a screen all day, shaking a little spinning rod with a little minnow on it. It gets boring. But a traditional guy like Gerald Swindle, running down the bank, flipping a jig, stuff like that, where forward-facing sonar won't help him, you'd get more people watching that. And then you'd get people that are fans of the smaller classes, the guys with the 18-foot boat with 90 horsepower on it, with the single monitor in the front and back. So I don't know. Tell me what you guys think. He's not totally off base. That forward-facing sonar is going to have an impact, or is having an impact on fishing. It's allowing people that aren't good fishermen to get into it. Kids that are good at technology. But I think what's going to happen is those kids are only going to know how to catch fish one way. And once they don't, or it's not working, once forward-facing sonar isn't working for them anymore, once the fish start getting smart onto it, or just, those days where they need to adapt, because we all need to adapt into fishing, they'll struggle. And I think it'll just eventually equalize itself out. I don't think, I don't know. That's my opinion on the whole thing. Tell me what you guys think. I'm not, like I said, it's not something I'd ever put on my boat. It's not something I'm interested in using. It's not my style of fishing. I like hammering the bank. I like fishing around the weeds up on the bank, or, lay downs and stuff on the bank. I'm not big on going offshore. I don't even really fish offshore points or anything like that. I pretty much go back in coves and find them there. If I don't find them there, I live close enough to the lake where I can just go home for the day. So tell me what you guys think in the comments. Is Randy completely off base? Does he got a point? Do you think different classes in bass fishing would be more desirable and it would help the sport progress? I think it'll help the sport progress. I think it'll allow smaller people like me, smaller boats and horsepower and minimal technology. I think he's just crashing out and having a midlife crisis and realizing the industry's leaving him behind, much like the off-road industry kind of left me behind. I saw it coming. I'm not really mad about it. I got out of off-road. I'm not really building anymore. I kind of just pick and choose the fab jobs I want to do, and got a different job. So, yep, that's my opinion on the whole thing. Tell me what you guys think.